How's it going, everyone? And thank you for tuning into this episode of the Hanging Up the Boots podcast. In this episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing my best friend, Cameron Barts. He was one of the CNE experts on our deployment, our computer guys. He was on the other ship for the majority of the deployment, but he is an incredibly talented programmer. He's working for Microsoft right now, and it was really awesome to have him on the show and talk about his experience. So please give it up for Cameron Barts. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have my best friend Cameron here, and man, it's really fucking good to see you.
What's up, man?
It's been, I actually just saw the Facebook memory. It's been a little over a year since we were out there, so
Yeah,
we're going to try to
it
make that
has.
happen soon. But a lot's been different. I saw you got, you got at least one dog. You got a dog, Venus?
Yeah, Venus, my baby.
Mm-hmm. Wait, you have an actual baby, but
Well, but Venus.
yeah.
Yeah, I have a baby, a human toddler. I have a dog toddler. I have a snake toddler, ball python.
Guido.
Guido.
Guido. He's the man.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fucking good to see you, dude. All right, so
Good to see you too, man.
we've it didn't seem like you really wanted to do the show when I first kind of was on the fence. I was on the fence about doing it, and you were like, I don't know if that's really my bag, and then you kind of warmed up to it.
Yeah.
I'm not taking
You
a
know-
stab at you, man. I'm just
No. Well, I had my reasons, and my main reason was the same thing that everybody's talking about in your other episodes. I didn't feel like I had much of a story that people could relate to,
Mhm.
and I just, never been a camera person, never been in front of the camera person. Was been more of a behind the scenes type of guy. So,
Yeah, I
but
gotcha.
listening to Brandon and Coop and John's Rude, I realized that there's a story here for me to tell.
Perfect.
And I thought that this was the best medium to do that.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it's I've kind of been the same way. I talk for a living, and I've always been a talker, but I've never been one to be in front of the camera. My dad always said I had a face for radio, and it took me a couple years to figure out that he was calling me ugly. So fuck you, Dad.
Yeah,
But
he's not wrong.
yeah, I fuck you too. But so for those of you that didn't deploy with us, Cam is a computer genius. Like,
Wouldn't say all that, but
well, he's also impossibly humble, and it's really fucking frustrating sometimes. But he's my best friend and like an actual like super genius. And we became very unlikely homies during the workup because he's a more soft-spoken, quiet guy. He likes to be behind the scenes, and as I'm sure you all have noticed by now, I will never shut the fuck up. And so it just we just kind of meshed naturally. And
from the beginning, from the onset.
yeah, just right off the rip. And and it just kind of never slowed down. We've just always been really tight. We lived together for a long time, and so I'm really glad to have him here. So
And Colin's the godfather to my baby, so
yeah,
we're pretty close. Yeah.
yeah. Grace is probably I have never felt more I'm very vocally on record not being a fan of children. I would do some pretty despicable shit to protect that baby. I've never I don't like kids. I fucking adore that child. But anyway, before we fall too down that emotional rabbit hole, we'll go down a different one. So I've been starting off with everybody talking about what landed them on the yellow footprints, and there's been a slew of different answers. And so, it's actually been a lot more varied than I expected. So, what was your life like pre Marine Corps, and what got you into a recruiter's office and, onto that path? Also, your birds aren't real hat is killing me right now.
Yeah. So pre-Marine Corps, I really identified as a church teenager. I had come up really heavily into this youth group, and throughout my teenage years, I did a lot of stuff for the church. Um, I also was pretty good at school. Um,
Yeah, you
I
went to
took
one
as
of
many.
those magnet schools, right? The engineering
Uh,
one.
so I didn't actually do the engineering stuff, but that was one of my school's traits. Was that they had an engineering hall, so they had a lot of classes that were focused on people trying to get into engineering jobs. So the benefit for me was there was a lot of teachers teaching a lot of like AP style classes and AP level classes, as well as like dual enrollment class, and I was in as many of those to take, and I was doing pretty good. Um, Graduated top 20 and pretty huge class. And everybody kind of had it for me to go to college. And all throughout the years, I thought I was going to go to Liberty, um, because that was kind of what everybody else was doing. All the other identifying as church kid people. Um, the next logical step was to go to Liberty.
Is Liberty like a church affiliated university, or?
Yeah, it's Jerry Falwell College. It's a very Southern Baptist
Oh yeah, I'm
seminary
a
school.
California heathen dude. I don't know anything about that shit.
Yeah. Um, and coming around my junior senior year, I realized that I'd always really kind of played the role that a lot of other people wanted me to play.
Hmm.
Um, I was, in the classes that would, graduate me pretty like standing well for college, and I didn't even know what it is that I would want to. Around the same time, um, kind of a really long story, but I'd met my half brother for the first time. This was when I was like becoming a teenager, and when I met him, he was serving in the Marine, and it was the first time I'd ever actually heard. Was when I was a teenager, and I like because of him, I looked up really into it and kind of got swept up by the mindset of them being the best of the best, and I was you know, enamored with that lifestyle to be the best at whatever it is that I was doing. And there was just kind of a defiant streak in me that I did not want to do what everybody wanted me to do. And I figured coming up in a single parent household uh, with my dad, who did, he did a fantastic job, but he was a single parent and he's a truck driver. So it's not like I was going to get a whole lot of help going to college outside of student loans.
Mm.
And that's never been super appealing to me. So I figured I could do something in the military, just do my time, get college good and paid for. And at the time, I figured if I was going to go to college, I was going to go all the way. I thought they paid for all your college, and it turns out that that was not true. Um,
Yeah.
but so I started talking to her in my junior year, and I was pretty fat, like I am now. Um, Um, and he was like, "Hey, man, I'm, not gonna sugarcoat it. You're pretty big, but we'll get you down there." And I joined the pulley program, and I had all these aspirations of becoming the guide, and I did it. And I thought, I no better way to be on top of the world. Took my uh, took my ASVAB and I got a 97. It's pretty high.
It goes
Uh,
up to 99 for those of you that never took the ASVAB. So that's
it's a
pretty fucking
percentile.
high. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a percentile score, but I didn't know anything about it. I just took the test.
Mm,
So the counselor that told me about my score, she just kind of caught me in the hallway and she was like, "Hey, Cameron, I just want to let you know because I just got and you got a 97." And I looked at her, I was like, "Is that good?" Like, I don't. What's the scale? She was like, and then she told me exactly what you just said. She was like, "Well, it's a percentile to 99. You did about as good as what you can do."
yeah.
So that was good. And then, that got back to my recruiter, and he was like, "All right, man, here's the deal. We're slating you to be a linguist if you want it to be. And there's a like a 10K bonus in it."
Yeah, that's what got
Or
my
so,
stupid 17-year-old ass.
yeah. And I was like, "Sure, sign me up." And he was like, "Well, you have to take the D lab, and a lot of people don't do so good on." I was like, "Well, can't be much harder than the ASVAB." And I took it, and I got like a 108 or 118 or something. And he
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Well, you you did you did well enough to do
So,
language stuff."
yeah, you could. I think if you got, I think you'd be able to do a cat. Shit, I forgot the delineation, but that's like the Spanish and Tagalog and stuff like that.
Yeah, it didn't really matter because in the same breath he was like, "But here's the deal. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna try to bone you on this. The the bonus has gone away. You can still sign on for this contract, but I can't promise that the bonus will come out of it because they're doing."
Mm.
And I was like, "Well," and he talked to me about on how the school's like the longest. And I was like, "Well, I don't really want that." He was like, "Well, we can still sign you on for an intelligence contract, and you can, just go that field, and you'll promise that you'll end up somewhere in intelligence, um, and but it doesn't guarantee that you'll be a leader or anything." I was like, "Well, I mean, that's as good as anything I can ask for."
Mm-hmm.
I'd never, some people like Brandon, some people want to go out here and coop. They want to join the Marine Corps and they want to be grunts. That idea never really appealed to me. Um, I wanted to wear the uniform, but you know, I didn't want to enjoy things sucking for its own sake. Great.
Yeah.
That was never my dig. So I go to boot camp. That goes as well as it can. Go to MCT, and I get the orders at the end of MCT, and they're like, "Well, you're going to Florida, to Pensacola." And I get there, and they're like, "Well, yeah, you're gonna be a 21." Mean anything, but whatever. I proceed to do the school in 450, and they told me they were like, "You're gonna be here for a little bit, so just do your best in school, and really try for try in PT, and then the top of class, if there's any slots for this like offensive type work, then we'll put you in those classes, and you'll do that as a follow-on school, and we'll change your MOS." Well, that seemed really appealing to me. I'm talking about this offensive stuff, this kind of like hacking stuff, and that seemed really appealing to me.
And that's JCAC probably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
um, and you know, I did everything I could. Um, I was second in my class, um, basically from day one until the week before the last test, and I'd become a squad leader. I was, pretty green, and they threw a lot of really tough situations at me at the time. I had a guy in my squad who was probably the worst Marine that I've ever had to deal with, and if
Oh God, I remember
he,
that story.
yeah, if he did anything to screw up, um, like I got in a lot of trouble for it, and the guide who was my best friend, there, Harley Harrison. he would get in trouble. So more so for him, because he was eating a lot of dirt for the rest of the platoon anyway. I wanted to try to keep this guy under wraps, under control, and that was just really tough. But you push through.
Mm.
That guy ended up getting getting forced out. I don't know if that went away just now.
No, you're good.
Uh, and anyway, so I'm going through this 450 class, and I'm a squad leader. I am second in my class. I do tutoring at like the mandatory voluntary, where they keep some people who have failing grades behind. And I do like voluntary tutoring for people who are struggling in class. So I'm doing everything I can for um, just these slots.
Yeah,
Uh,
the Marine Corps has this weird way of in like it- basically conning you into taking on additional shit to separate yourself to get these sometimes completely imaginary rewards.
yeah. Well, it wasn't imaginary, and they
Well,
and
those
the
weren't. Yeah, but
in the beginning of the class, the teacher, um, who was also our platoon commander, she was like, "Well, it's looking like if everything works out well, it's looking like there's going to be uh, four or four slots, two slots or something." I was like, "Well, if I stay second in class, one of those is mine, right?" Well, it comes to the very last test, and I was like, "Well, this is in the bag, man. Like I'm doing everything I can." And the last test was, I don't even remember what the subject matter was, but I remember it being a little bit difficult, knowing that I probably should study a little bit more, but you can't make this stuff up. I actually went to Valo to help tutor somebody else so they would like fail the class.
mm-hmm.
And when I did that, I didn't get the study time that I needed to do. And in that one test, I dropped from second to, and then the next week she came back and she was like, "Well, we only have two slots."
Oh man.
Yeah, and I was pretty crushed because that was the goal for me. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, "Well, you're going to Texas." And I go there, and that was completely unremarkable. Other than the fact that when I got there, it was the worst time. It was, you know, um, go to the chow hall in your Charlies. You got to be in uniform in your room
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that, and the nightly formations. There's also the time if Oates, that kid Jimmy Oates, he like went
I
off
do.
base. Yeah, he went off base and without anybody, and he got us all in trouble.
Yeah, I remember that
It
guy.
was it was yeah, it was literally the worst time. And I remember just keeping my head down, trying not to think about nothing, and get through. And I was like, the the goal in that time was the fleet.
Yeah, that
And
mythical place.
yeah, and everything you ever hear from boot camp all the way through A school, B school, like the fleet. Once you get there, um, it gets pretty chill. They treat you like an adult. Um, you do your I staff sergeant and all that stuff, but you like go to the chow hall whenever you get hungry. You do PT, but it's not like every morning, and it's certainly not a sleigh fest or that. And so in my head, I'm like, I just got to make it. Um, I actually slated for uh, Hawaii first, I think. No, I slated for Lejeune first, because it was close to my family, and I put Pendleton second, and I didn't get Lejeune. Hindsight, probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And I go to Pendleton, and I show up in battalion. Uh, Funny story, I got a ticket coming in from the airport the first time um,
Nice.
into battalion. Yeah,
Welcome to California.
yeah. Gate guard, 2 a.m. in the morning, decides to pull over the car. And I had my sea bag. It was me and three other dudes. or two dudes and one guy in the front, and it was like the really tiny car. And it was so tiny that with our sea bags on top of us, because we had them in our laps, I couldn't put my seatbelt on. Neither could anybody else. But if we got into a car accident, like there's no give in between me and the sea bags. Like I'm in a giant cushion.
Yeah.
Um, and this guy who had nothing better to do pulled us all out of the car, and he's like, "Well, you guys weren't wearing seatbelts, so I'm gonna write you up tickets." And he's like, "You guys are speeding through here. It's 15 through here." And our driver, he was like, was doing like 17. So my bad.
Yeah.
It's not like we weren't gonna stop. Um, so that was fun. The next day, I put on my alphas and I go in the first sergeant's office, who, if you remember, First Sergeant Ewing.
I do.
Yeah, just the biggest, tankiest dude. Scary too. Talked with that really, really deep voice. This is my
Like
first.
James Earl Jones kind of voice. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is my first interaction with Italian. And he sits me in this office and tells me about all this like no nonsense procedures or whatever. And he's like, "Well, do you have anything to tell me?" Starting off, I was like, "Well, First Sergeant got a ticket last night." And he's like, he was like, "Wow, um, way to start." I was like, and he asked me the story, and I told him the whole thing, and he was like, those lance corporals probably had nothing better to do. He was like, I roll into the gate all the time, and they don't say anything because I'm a first sergeant. He was like, you'll just go to the magistrate's office, and if you pay the ticket, you pay the ticket, but I'm not going to get you in trouble for this. He was like, this is stupid.
Yeah, he was a cool dude.
Yeah, and in that moment, I felt like it was going to be all right. You know,
Mm-hmm.
everything was starting to go good because Texas and 450, with the big upset of 450 in Texas just being awful the entire time, I was like, well, I finally made it to the end. I'm in the fleet. People treat me like an adult here. And then checking it at S1 downstairs, and the group of master sergeants and first sergeants was down there because they just got out of a staff meeting, whatever. I'm still in my alphas, and Steve Wozniak, master sergeant type, he looks me in the eye, and this is comes back into play later on in the story. Um, he was like, "Well, what do you want to do? You want to be teams or you want to be an analyst?" And at that point, I didn't want to be anything to do with teams because all I'd heard from TSOC and everything was like, teams go out to the field all the time. They're doing like real Marine Corps stuff, and whereas the analysts they get to stay up in rooms with all air conditioning and stuff. I'm like, I don't see why that sounds so bad. Like, I like that seems like it's my gig.
Mm-hmm.
So I told him, I'm like, Master, I want to be an analyst. He was like, Are you sure about that? And I was like, A Lance Corporal, sure as I can be right now. I don't
Yeah.
know any different. He was like, Well,
I was
fine.
taught nothing but T-Sock shit, and they're all teams like apes.
Right. And that's what I thought. I had this. I will even put it this way. I had this really toxic idea in my head about teams guys. I thought it was very stereotypical, um, and it was based on nothing. It was based on my TSOC instructors who, you know, they fit that mold very well. They were kind of apes. Um, so he put me in Charlie Meb, where when I showed up, they were like, "Welcome to Charlie Meb. It's where Marines go to die and never deploy."
I
And I
forgot
was,
about the MEB because I
yeah,
think it was dissolved by the time I got there.
yeah. Um, it was, a platoon stood up for deployment that everybody knew was never going to happen.
Mm.
And I went, and I had, decent leaders out there. But as soon as I got there, they're like, "Glad you're here. You're going to ITX."
ITX being a 5-week field exercise in the middle of
The desert.
29 Palms, which is designed to simulate the Middle East. So, quick aside for 29 Palms, jumping ahead a little bit, that's where Cam and I became friends. We went to another ITX when we stood up for the deployment. And so we're driving our little happy ass convoy down, like, we're basically riding through the desert on a horse with no name through a desert fucking highway. All of these like old rock songs put together. And on one side of the freeway, you see 29 Palms, the Marine Corps. I, they don't
It's
call it a
an
base. It's
installation.
like a
Yeah,
yeah,
it's an installation. Yeah.
it's a full, but it's a town-sized base basically, and then on the other side is just meth shanty town, like
Yeah.
Brazilian favela, like District 9 South Africa apartheid era, like corrugated aluminum shanty houses. And I was
Yeah.
like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah.
It's a crazy it's a weird place, but
Yeah. So there's a saying that goes around. Your YouTubers can verify this. They say Joshua trees only grow at the entrance of heaven and at the entrance of hell. And Joshua trees grow in Israel,
mhm.
and they grow in 29. So it's not it's not hard to figure out which one's which.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Well, I mean, depends on who you ask, but
yeah. But anyways, so me having made this like stand strong against the very teams oriented master sergeant being an analyst. He sends me to the Charlie Meb, and the first thing I hear is, "Guess what? You're going to be going out to the field anyway for 5 weeks." Oh, great.
yeah.
Well, the thing about me going out to the field was they did not have time to train me
Mm,
to be an analyst
mm.
because the analyst pipeline is pretty long. But they wanted me to get out there to get exposure, I guess.
On the job training.
Right. Well, um, here's where stories are going to start crossing here.
Mm,
In the in between time between me showing up and when we were supposed to go to ITX, uh, I'm sitting in the bay, checking my phone, waiting for the end of the day, and a group of Marines walks in, and they start dropping Pelican cases. They're like, "Hey, we're about to start class here in a little bit," and I see this PFC with the brightest blue eyes and the longest black hair I've ever met. And that Marine is Cooper G. Westerman.
yep.
um,
And who I reiterate in our episode, but Cooper is despicably good looking.
oh yeah, I hate it.
Me too.
And at the like, he was like, lifting a lot at the time, so and he had the black hair and like the curl or whatever, and the blue eyes. He walked in and he looked straight up like Superman,
yeah.
like Clark Kent. Um,
Uh-huh.
um,
He'd probably
he's
just
like,
been
yeah,
busted down right then.
yeah. It was right after,
Mm-hmm.
and it was him and Ron, who a lot of the passion for the stuff that I do now comes from Cooper Westerman and Ron Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they start this class and they're like, "Hey, there are too many people in this class who didn't sign in the thing." I was like, "Well, I didn't sign it because I wasn't here. I just showed up." And they're like, "Oh, well, you can just sit in." I was like, sick, like
Thanks.
training. But they start going into this Wi-Fi stuff, and it was like a revelation to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that they were doing was so next level for me. It was like looking back on it, some pretty minor stuff, but it was earth shattering. I was like, this is movie magic stuff. This is hacking. I am elite hacksaw doing this class right
I'm in.
now. Yeah, yeah, hacker voice. I'm in.
Yeah.
And I remember at the end of the class, I talked to Ron. I was like, "Hey, man, I know this was just kind of like a hip hop class, but this is the stuff that I like want to be doing." And like, what do I need to do this like forever? for my job and
Mm-hmm.
when I get out and stuff. And he gave me my first inkling of resources. And he said, "Hey," and he started. He was, "This isn't really. It's not impossible, but it's not super easy. But you know, we'll try to find space for you and stuff." I was like, "Well, okay." Uh, and I went on that, and the burning in my soul, you know, the same goal that I had when I was in TSOC to get to the fleet, it was back. And I was like, I'm going to be a part of this, whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I was still slave for ITX. So I go out to ITX, hate every minute of it. But there's not, like I said, there's not a whole lot I can be doing. Um, in the daytime, I watch as the teams that go out there, they just get slaughtered by these rabbits every day. They get told how garbage their collection is. They like the analysts get told how garbage their collection is. And
And for the record, when we went to ITX, that shit wasn't that hard. Like,
right. And I'm like, well, you know, this sucks, but whatever. But I was spending my time um I was using nippers at nighttime
nippers
to get
being the
oh
unclassified systems that, yeah, not everybody that we use or
yeah
that's listening is, uh, familiar with the plethora of acronyms that we use all the
yeah
time. So I don't know what nipper actually stands for, but you probably do. But
I don't.
oh
It's just the unclass. It's the closest thing to unclass computers that the military has.
yeah, they're just normal computers that you can't send classified shit over. But
Yeah, and they're not. Yeah,
and they're
we'll
not
just
good
leave it there.
computers. They're 1,000 years old. But
Right, but I was using the nippers. I'd found out that the military gets access to Safari Books Online, which is now O'Reilly Books, and I was in there basically every night and I was like doing this hacking stuff. I was like reading as much as I could. Most of the stuff I did not have any idea what was going on, but I was just like trying to consume all these resources. Um and at the end of it, uh he who shall not be named and has not been named yet, this podcast, who ends up being our senior enlisted on the deployment. He was actually my senior in that ITX. And so while I was in the Nipper at nighttime doing all this stuff, he would come up to me. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I would show him. I was like, "Hey, I'm trying to get into or whatever." And he was like, "Oh, that's cool." And I didn't think anything of it. Um, and it comes towards the last week of that ITX, which, like you said, a 5 week exercise. And he pulls me outside. I'm on ECP. I'm the guard for the classified area,
mm-hmm.
and I'm on shift. And he gets somebody to take my shift, and he pulls me out to the side of the gate. I'm like, "What did I do?" Because this is, a freaking master sergeant. He's about to be in parade rest, and I'm sure I checked everybody in, like coming in. So it's not like doing my job. He pulls me in. He's like, "Hey, Barts. So I'm going on deployment." Uh,
You're like,
uh,
cool.
and that's what I said. I was like, "Congratulations, Master Sergeant. That's great." He was like, "Well, here's the thing. I have a slot for a C&E specialist, and I want to take you." I was like, "Well, Master Sergeant, like, um, I don't have the certification to do this. Like, I did a hip pocket class at, uh, like, I did like you know, the the most basic of stuff." He was like, "Yeah, I know."
That's like,
Um,
hey, we have an operation that needs to get done. You've seen Grey's Anatomy before, right? And you're like, yeah. And they're like, cool, get in here.
right. And he was like, "Well, we'll make sure that you get trained up." He was like, "But here's the thing." And he looks me dead in the eye. He was like, "You're gonna be a teams guy." And I was like, "Oh no,
Yeah.
oh no."
Fuck.
And it took like a real consideration. I was like, man, I like not a lot of people get to deploy in the battalion. I've heard that since I got here. I really do this C&E stuff. Uh, what the heck?
Mm-hmm.
But I hated it. I hated the idea of being a team. And again, it's because of that, that very, very um, stereotypical idea that I had
Mm-hmm.
in my head. So a couple weeks go by, get BSO to the deployment, show up to the bay the first time. There you are.
All fresh and
And
green. I've literally been in the fleet for a fucking month.
yeah, like days.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've only been in the battalion for a couple weeks, longer than you,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been on ITX. Um, and I remember it was like the first time we were all bay together. He comes out and he's like, "Hey, just to get down to business, we're going to ITX in a couple weeks." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
I remember that so vividly because you were like, "Fuck," or you were like
Yeah.
so visibly upset, and I didn't know what ITX was, so I was like, "Why? What's the big deal?" You're like, "It's a fucking field exercise." I was like, "Okay,"
Not
and
just
like
and
yeah, it's the
yeah,
field exercise, and I was like, "Okay, so like yeah, it's field. The going to the field blows, but like who cares?" And you're like, "I literally just got back from one." I was like, "Oh
yeah,
man, that's tough." Okay.
yeah, yeah, and you know, but in the early days, it was I remember so clearly. It was you and I and Wolf and Sully, and then
Ugh.
Corporal of Marines Scott Seitz.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
remember
dude,
looking,
that's so weird to think about.
yeah, and I remember looking at this dude, and I'm like, this man is a human statue. Like, he's got the chiseled jaw, and he is huge. Not
Yeah.
to mention,
He's six
like,
like five.
yeah, and he just got back from
Afghan
deployment
yeah, from Afghanistan.
from
So he
Afghanistan.
was a real Marine.
Yeah, he's a real Marine.
Yeah, Scott
And,
is like just again for those of you who don't know, Scott is like that scene in Captain America where he like goes into the tank and they shoot him full of the super steroids and then he like steps out and he's all fucking yoked out and Peggy Carter grabs his titty. Yeah,
yeah,
Scott looks like that. It's
yeah,
it's like as handsome as Cooper is, Scott literally looks like he was sculpted by a gay version of Michelangelo.
yeah. And I didn't. We go to ITX. We'll just skip ahead a few weeks. We go to ITX,
Mm.
and I remember I was just still so bitter about being out there, being on this team. I still had in my head that the job could be done as an analyst or whatever, and boy was I wrong. And not to mention, I slot on the deployment depending on me getting the cert, and they closed down getting certs. Um,
Oh
and
yeah,
they weren't sure uh, what was going to happen with it. So I had this like extra billet of um, the assistant comms guy on the team next to Wolf, who was a savant with comms.
yeah.
Uh, and I just, we go out to ITX, and it gets about halfway in. We're not in the Mount Town, the big one. We're at one of those outposts. And I'd had this bad attitude for so long, and Scott gets me up in the because I'd said something the night before, and he drags me outside and he takes me across this fire and he lifes me for a good minute. And he was like, "Hey man, I don't I don't care about your attitude. I don't care what you think about being on a team, but here's the thing: you're not going to be any less than excellent on the team, because that's what I'm demanding of you." And he was like, "You can hate something and still be good at it, and hate it every second of it." And he was like, "If you do poorly, it reflects badly on me, and I'm not done anything wrong." Um, and in that moment, he fixed my attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
He had a way of
I
doing that.
yeah, he cleared me up, and I wish it hadn't gotten to that because the stuff that he was saying made um, more sense than what I could imagine at that time. Um, and from then on, I felt like everything I did, even though I hated doing it, it was to make the team better.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to care enough about everybody else on the team that I wanted the team to be successful. Then it got towards the end of that ITX, and I remember the best feeling that I've had in the Marine Corps, like as an active duty Marine, was in that field X. Do you remember when we did the
Hi,
hey
Brittany.
babe, that's my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you remember that time where we did the competition to see who could set up collection the fastest between the teams? It was the
I think so.
yeah, it was just some randomness that
Oh yeah, I do.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And we worked so well together that we did most of that without speaking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like we helped each other, um, and we were like, a well-oiled machine.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that being the proudest I had been, Marine Corps. I was like, I'm a part of a slick team.
Yeah.
Um,
We were pretty
and
shit hot at that ITX, man. I mean, it was a
yeah,
field exercise, so it didn't really mean too much, but like,
but
we
it
were
meant a
really
lot to
good.
me.
Me
Yeah,
too,
it meant a
yeah.
lot to me. And especially when I also remember, um, one of the analysts getting on the radio and calling for me specifically, which was not an easy task because they called Echo 3 Bravo, which was three different people on the team.
Yeah, you, me, and Wolf.
Yeah. And they were like, "Can you be more specific?" And they were like, "Eeyore," because I was cantankerous and that was my call sign was Eeyore.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, weird. And I get on the phone, and we were doing so well that they told me that I couldn't cheat in the ITX. I couldn't give away information that wasn't supposed to be given away till the end. I'm like, I'm not giving anything away. We're doing this correct. We're getting everything.
Yeah.
And the information that I'm giving them is stuff that was in the paperwork that you should have read. So I was like, we're doing so well that they think we're cheating.
Yeah.
Um, and that made me feel really good. And you know, with the even with um, the disagreements that Scott and I had in the beginning, Scott became the person that I wanted to make the proudest.
Oh yeah.
Um, and like whatever I was doing, I was like, you know, he does well on his own, but I'm gonna make sure that my part of this team life is gonna make him look good.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he can get us to do this stuff, then like we're gonna go out and we're gonna like actually do mission.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I did everything, all of everything that I was doing. I was trying to make him proud as the team leader, and I was trying to do my best for the team. Um,
And coming from a guy who didn't want to be on a team in the first place, that's a pretty big paradigm
yeah,
shift.
yeah, it was huge. And then I didn't mind being on the team so much. It wasn't as bad as what I was expected. And like it got to the point where we were going on these ridiculous field exercises that almost always failed. Um, and it was nothing to me. Um, I didn't look forward to them. I never did. Like I was never one of those like type people, or like you know raising my hand for whatever patrol. I wasn't that type, but if I needed it, I would. So it was a huge pair. Um, but as the deployment work up went on, things got harder and harder and harder. With some of the decisions that the command was making that put us all in tough spots, like like the the QuadCon situation.
Oh
Nobody
God.
nobody's brought that up yet, but we like
Please
in an
illuminate the our good listeners.
so that was the day I became the Tetris Marine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be- because so these quad cons, they are intended to be waterproof, modular storage containers that can be pretty easily brought onto a ship, and they're supposed to carry all of our gear. They're supposed to be sea.
Because and the thing is we had a shitload of gear.
Yeah,
Between the three teams, the RRP or the RRT, the LAV team, and the SIGINT support team, the SST, and all of the different capabilities that we were supposed to be able to bring to the table for this deployment, it wasn't just collecting, signals and stuff. Like we were supposed to be able to hit a lot of wickets, and that required a fuck ton of, cubic feet of boxes of shit. And so,
yeah. In the beginning, at the beginning of this day, we had something like 11 quad cons or 13 or something. And I remember that morning, and I remember like it's the weird things that you remember. I remember the weather of that morning. It was like a crisp, cool air for Southern California, so it was probably like 70 or something. And I remember it was you and me, and we were talking about going and getting burritos. Um, and he walks into the bay. He's like, "So here's the deal. Uh, we have to fit those quad cons in four." And I started laughing, and Scott's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, I told them you that we would four cons." And Scott was like, "Well, why would you say that? Like, what? Like, what brought you to the decision to say that?" He was like, "Well, I just want to save resources for you, other people to have their space, and if we had too much." He's like, "Well, I don't know what you mean we have too much when we have enough to fit our stuff. Either like we, get rid of our stuff and become less efficient in our job, or this can't happen." And that was the first time it's going to happen because I say it's. I was like, oh, and
and
I
bear in
already,
mind that it's not like the people at the Mew were like, we need more space. They were like,
yeah,
how
that
much
came
space
out
do
later.
you need? And he's like, four. Just
Yeah,
arbitrarily.
yeah, and I remember talking to the master sergeant at the, and he's like, I don't know why he said that. If you guys need space, there's plenty of space. Like,
Yeah,
there,
there's
and
three
we got,
fucking warships. We're good.
yeah, and so, but we didn't know that until later. Um,
Well,
and
yeah.
I'd already, and I'd already kind of made a name for myself as remembering how the stuff got packed. So Scott just looks at me and he's like, "Hey, you're this." I was like, "Oh, good."
Yeah.
And we were there day, and we pulled everything out, and we had to turn in gear that would have made us better. We had to, there was a lot of stuff we just had to give back, and at the end of it, we barely got stuff down to the four quadcons, and it was like for real Tetris pack. Like there wasn't a square inch of
Yeah.
air in there. And then even then, we had to get the entire team to shut the door to pack it all in,
Yeah.
and that was stressful. But it was just stuff like that over. And then the stuff with Brandon happened right before we had to leave. Um, it was just super stressful.
Yeah.
Um, Not to mention, in the midst of this time, I go home and I get married, which that wasn't stressful. But I am on my honey, and Scott calls me. He was like, "This is the worst time for me, and especially this." but you need to clear money on your government travel charge card. There's a $400 balance on it that you shouldn't need to pay, but you need to do it right now. I'm like, I am on my honeymoon. I took out, a 8 grand loan for my wedding. Like, $400 is kind of a big deal for me right now. He was like, it's not coming from me, man. Just try to make it happen. Get you paid back. And so that happened right before we were supposed to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it was just that built up. And then I was I would say in the midst of the I was really happy to be on the team. I was not happy to be on the deployment, and I just felt like um, once we were on the ship, things were getting only worse. Um,
And you were right.
yeah, yeah, and then and then um, and then the stuff with Lumet happened, and that never. I took that a lot harder than what I probably ever should have. But see, him and I weren't, we weren't really close.
Mm-hmm.
We, I mean, we would talk in passing. Uh, it was we were we were close in the same way all of us were being on the on the detachment, but we weren't like best friends. Like I wouldn't invite him to my or something.
Yeah, that's the same
But
analogy that I used when I was talking about it with Brandon.
yeah, but that hit me so hard because when all that stuff happened, when he was about to get um, in whatever trouble that he was about to get into, I remember being on the field decks and we were all still on ship, and I had dinner with him. It was me and Wolf. We had dinner with him. We sat and read on the ship, and Wolf and I were about to go to the field. We were about to get on a Humvee or whatever. We, um, I remember that just that being the last time we talked to him. It just seeming so,
So normal.
yeah, so like you always look at back at situations like that, and you're like, well, I should have something, but there was nothing there. We
Yeah.
had dinner with him. It's not like I mean, we had dinner with because you know we knew that he was getting into some trouble, and we wanted him to know that you know not everybody was upset or whatever. We just wanted to let him know that we're all still here. We're gonna let whatever happen make him an outcast to us because that's what they wanted. That's what the leadership wanted, was to make like an example of him. Like, I mean, we're still gonna eat. He's still one of us,
Yeah,
right?
he's not going to become a pariah. I don't know how much detail I went into it on with Brandon. I don't really recall. But long story short, this Marine that was on our detachment was going to get in trouble, and then, like you said, everything seemed pretty normal. He seemed pretty understandably dejected and upset at the fact that he was going to get in trouble. And then, um,
They they sent him back to shore.
yeah, they sent him back to shore. And then when we came back to, uh,
Well,
battalion,
when they sent him to shore is when they sent us.
to the field.
Um, yeah, we went out for like a day or something. We were supposed to just be attached. Um, and I remember we had gotten a call that we, not the people that we were attached to, had to come back to Delmar. And I remember as we were fueling the truck up to get back because we didn't have enough fuel, truck. Um, Scott pulls us aside and he was like, I want you to, uh, you know, LeMay's gone. And we're like, well, what do you mean he's gone? I just had dinner with
Yeah.
him. And they pull us back, and like it's nighttime at this point. Like it's back pretty late in the evening. Get into the full circle to tell us this, and you know you have your memories of Dijon. I just my memory is the dinner,
Yeah.
is like the meal that we had,
Yeah.
and how just regular it was. Like there was nothing spectacular at dinner, and nothing spectacular about the conversation. And then just to be hit by something like that, like
Yeah.
it really does knock the wind out of you.
Yeah. That was the thing is we didn't my team didn't know at all.
Oh yeah, because you had moved on to the LA.
Yeah. Yeah, we were on the
Yeah,
LAV and we, got to shore and we're driving back the LAV which, you know, I obviously not everybody listening could do it, but it's a fucking riding in an LAV is a pretty fucking fun experience.
yeah,
You're stand like cuz you're standing on a chair and your torso is out of this hatch on the top of essentially this fucking tank and you're
yeah,
just rolling down service streets like blasting people with exhaust and it's just a lot of fun. You're just hooting and hollering and having a good time at that point we were like cool, we get to come home early. Like I don't know
right,
why, but I don't have to be on that ship for an extra 3 days. Ha ha ha. And
yeah.
then we get to the FIOC and we have that school circle or whatever. Actually, was it in the FIOC or was it? I don't. No, it was at Delmar. But
It was at Delmar, right around the man building.
yeah. And so, but we get into the school circle, and like I said with Brandon, our commander and sergeant major didn't know that we didn't know.
Yeah.
So he's like, so how are you guys all taking the news? And we're like,
What
what
news?
news?
Yeah,
And he's like, well, Corporal LeMay is gone. And we're like, it he is? What do you mean?
right.
And that
Yeah,
went
like he went
exactly how you would
AWOL.
expect. Yeah, we're like, yeah, it took a second for it and some very uncomfortable hashing out of the verbiage to
Yeah,
really kind of fully understand what was going on. And then yeah, it was pretty ugly.
yeah. But looking back on the scenario, like I carried that, and that you know I objectively you know should not have had a lot of weight. Like other than I knew the guy and um, as close to me as anybody else on the detachment. I didn't have it as bad as who was really close to him, like Hanson, who had to identify him. Those guys had it really hard,
Mm-hmm.
and I always felt a sense of guilt because of how hard I took it, and I didn't even have a reason to. And so that was really tough. But I'm going to pivot away from that to talk about other things. Talking about Cooper, and this is not going from a heavier subject to a lighter subject. I remember getting Cooper on the team, and I was super excited. I was super excited to get Cooper on the team because he had taught me what I knew, and um, I it never really occurred to me that Cooper wasn't going to be good with higher ups. Like I knew his hair wasn't,
Yeah.
and I knew he had an attitude, but I thought things were going to go great because Cooper, as mentioned in his interview with you, is one of the smartest people. And if not the smartest, he like when he gets his mind dug in on something that I don't think really showed very well in the interview. Once he's in on something, and he has his mind on it. He's one of the most like you know gritty people. Like he will know every um and he, especially when he gets interested in something like CNE or whatever, like he was an excellent peer to be doing that work with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was excited for him to be in the team the entire time. Um and then backing up, a half step, I go on my honeymoon, or I go to get married, and I come back and he's not around. And I ask around, where is he? And they're like, oh yeah, we sent him the analyst course. We needed a person to become an analyst. And he just, got chose. Uh, and I like immediately, like everything in me sunk because, Cooper was a better C&E operator than me. He taught me everything I knew, like literally taught me. And then to find out that he just got chosen because he was around, that should have been my spot. And I felt a lot of guilt for that, uh, that he got chosen instead of me to do that, and especially knowing how it affected on one ship. Like, Superman Coop turned into pretty, like, pretty dejected looking guy.
Yeah.
Um, and like I knew, like he was handling it as well as he could on the outside. It was no secret that he was taking it pretty hard.
Yeah.
And knowing the entire deployment, that should have been my spot. If I had just been around, that it very well could have been me that took that place. Um, I've been cursed by a weird luck in my Marine Corps career. It ebbs and it flows. I got really lucky with my recruiter. He could have just put me as a linguist,
Mm-hmm.
and everything would have been different. And then if I would have gotten JCAC or team, which is um, like for as how terrible it was probably the most defining experience of who I am. If I can put a finger on anyone in my life. So the fact that I just so happened to go at this, they just needed to go do analyst course and become an analyst on the ship. I felt really lucky that it wasn't me, but I felt terrible that it that it was me at the same time.
Yeah, but again, it's not like you didn't get the spot because you like overslept and like
Yeah,
somebody in the they just like picked somebody at morning formation that you slept through and someone was like, "Yeah, he's a dental." And nothing came
yeah,
from it. And like you read stories about people that like Seth MacFarlane, the Family Guy creator and everything.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah, the Family Guy. You know, the only reason that he didn't die in 9/11 was because he slept through his alarm and missed a flight.
yeah,
And so it's like, it and obviously that is a super intense, consequence,
yeah,
but I understand where you're coming from, especially because you and I, you even more so at the time probably were so much closer to Coop, and
yeah,
it did affect him so. But you know, it was your fucking honeymoon, man. Like
yeah.
it's not like you're
But
like, oh, I need to stop for gas or I have a flat
right.
tire.
But even so, even logically, you can tell yourself that stuff, but it still has an emotional.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the same.
Um,
That's kind of how I felt with the Lumet thing too. Is like he and I weren't. I wasn't gonna invite him to my wedding, but
yeah,
like that that whole situation, especially compounded on just how emotionally taxing the entire workup and everything was anyway,
yeah,
that was like just a huge like mental and emotional load to start bearing
Right.
regardless of, your proximity to it. Like, obviously affected Wolf and stuff differently, but, you know, like there were several things over the course of not just my Marine Corps career, but like I went through, or a couple of my friends committed suicide while I was in high school,
Yeah.
and like one of them I was closer to one than the other, but like that, I mean, I still think about that, and I graduated 8 years ago now. Fuck, I'm
Yeah.
old, but um, but like it's not like when you think about the impact of something like that, you don't really think about the full breadth of its impact on the people around the epicenter. Like you're always like, well, naturally it'll affect, their wife or
Yeah.
their husband or their parents or their immediate family or their closest coworkers or something like that, but like the the ripple effect that comes off of something as serious as something like that is much more, it holds a lot more gravity than I think people are ready to accept,
Yeah.
because I feel like a lot of people feel the same way, where it's like, I don't know why that's still fucking me up so bad. Like I don't know why, we weren't best friends, like, blah blah blah, but it's, I think it's natural to still feel like, fuck, that was somebody that I saw almost every day. I we ate together, like, before we went on the ships and stuff. Like I would, shoot the shit with him about his cars, and we'd eat burritos from the gut truck and stuff. Like we'd go to the gut
Oh
truck together and go to chow and stuff like that. But we saw him every day. He was a fixed point in our life that
yeah.
suddenly was not there.
Right.
And it also came with, you know that also brought such a serious dose of disdain and resentment toward the command and how they handled it,
Oh yeah.
that
Oh
was that added to it as well, because it's like, not only are we having to mourn the the seemingly completely preventable death of, somebody close to us, or near us and around us all the time. We all felt that it was completely unnecessary and completely avoidable, and had the people in charge handled things differently, and been more reasonable and stuff like that, it he would still be with us walking around, maybe a little worse for wear, career wise, but he'd still be alive. And then we found out he had a fucking baby that nobody knew about, and
yeah.
that made it even worse. And then, and who knows if we were right, but like that's, I don't know about you, but that's how I felt about it. I was like, they totally could have handled this completely differently, and that dude would still be around.
Yeah.
His daughter, I think it was a daughter, but his daughter would still have a dad. His girlfriend would still have, you know, her boyfriend, and we'd still have him on our deployment, or not,
Around.
but he'd
Yeah.
still be
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah.
So
We'd still see him in passing.
yeah, and
And
it,
it's just, an incredibly heavy thing.
yeah,
Um just all around. But that's not something you bring up a lot while you're in. It's not something you really talk about with other people, because um like, who do you bring it up to? Like, you talk to other people on the team, and you're afraid that they're going to come at you with, why are you, that's like, you talk to them. Um but realistically, it wouldn't ever have been. I know I could have brought it up to you if I was struggling. I just, in the moment, I never wanted to, because I just thought it was ridiculous. And
yeah,
that's part of the story that I wanted to get out here, is um, just like what you've been saying with Brandon and Coop, and everybody. Some of the feelings that we feel are ridiculous to us, and we think that we feel a certain we don't have the right to feel a certain way
Mm-hmm.
about things. Um, and I just wanted to, add compound on that, and you know, just to piggyback off what the commander said here.
Oh God.
Um, um, that there's a lot of stuff that affects it we feel is ridiculous. But anyway, we step off on shit.
Yeah.
Um, and man, I cannot imagine how it could have gone worse.
Yeah. It
Um,
literally probably only could have been worse for us mentally if the boat sank.
yeah. Well, to start us off, we're 2 weeks on ship. Um, we stop in Hawaii for our first call. We come back from Hawaii, or it's not Hawaii, it's Hong Kong first for my first perk. I was on a different ship than Colin.
Mm.
Um, and we all get back on ship, raring to go, and the double friggin' dragon just completely wipes through our ship.
And please
Which
explain
is
to the great listeners what it is and why it's called that.
so the double dragon is viral gastroenteritis. And it's called the double dragon because it shoots flames out of both directions, front and back. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it is rampant on our ship. Um, everybody has it. There are things that are completely closed. Like our entire medical ward was like it was just filled to capacity, and that was just the beginning. you know, we get past it. We I guess you could say recover from it. And we're like, well, that has to be the worst of it.
Yeah.
That has like
Can only go uphill from here. Yeah.
it can't get worse than that right there. And um and boy, was I so
Yeah.
wrong. So boy was I wrong because uh because of a tiny little lie that they decided to tell us before we ever actually set out. They told us all for the Marines. Let me back up one step. You can edit all that stuff out. So when you're on a Navy ship as a Marine or as a sailor, sailors, if it's their first deployment, they have what's referred to as a crank, which is they give you just a really terrible job, and you have to do that for 9 months or some ridiculous amount of time before you're able to do your regular job. Well, to compensate for Marines not having cranks, they give us these things called ship's taxes. Um, and it's basically where they put Marines in the most terrible of conditions on the ship. And you're doing that stuff in order to, I guess, pay your way into the ship. But it's not like you have to pay rent because you're being forced to be there. It's so strange. Um, but they told us um, if you get your ship's tax uh, done and over with in the um, in the ship exercises before you go on deployment, you won't have to do it when you're on deployment and risk missing a port call. And I was like, well, sign me up. Like, I do not care about these ship exercises. They're not going to send us out. So I'm just going to be twiddling my thumbs on the ship anyway. Sign me up for the tax. They sent me to the galley, which isn't the worst. Could have been doing laundry. Laundry is they send you to this like 130-degree room, and you're in there sweating doing those laundry. Day. So I was glad I didn't get that. But they sent me to the second worst place, which is the galley, and you're in this room with these petty officers who think that they are actually the next best thing since Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And they have just this superiority complex And I'm a Lance Corp at the time, so I'm just doing what I got to do. And they're like, "Hey, just keep your head down." And I was like, "Well, I'm not gonna have these, sailors yelling at me." So I outright volunteer. I was like, "What's the worst thing that nobody wants to do? As long as I get to do it, and just leave me alone while I'm doing it, I'll be done." They're like, "Well, you're gonna be washing some dishes." I was like, "That's not bad. I was wrong. It was that bad." Um, washing dishes for, you know, for meals that feed the entire ship, which is a small city.
Yeah, the Boxer carried what, 8,000 people?
Yeah, it's a ridiculous amount of people. And you're washing dishes to feed every junior, like non-staff level person on the ship. And I was washing my hands for or washing dishes for hours on it, and it was like sweaty and grimy, super gross. Um, but I was doing it. I was like, "Want to have to do this on ship?" You get halfway into the ship, and they're like, "Well, we're run out of people to do ship tax, so we're gonna have to do it." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Um, I had already done my time, and I was like, I'm ineligible, and they that doesn't matter to them. In the meantime, I picked up. Well, I was like, "All right, well, I'll submit." Nope, wash dishes because I had made a name for myself, dishwasher, last time, so that wasn't very fun. And so double dragon out of the way, double like my second ship tax out of the way. We're about halfway through the deployment, and mind you, since the moment we've walked on the ship, the our command is telling me specifically, they're like, "We're gonna send you in a country, um, and you're gonna perform some operations out there or whatever. Not afraid, um, and you're actually gonna be able to do the work that you've trained to do." And I was stoked the entire time. And I had, my go bag ready. I kept my bag at the front, like my what do you call the big bags, the hiking bags,
The
main
Il-
packs.
the Ilbies?
Yeah, I kept my main pack in the front of the berthing, like in front of the storage section, because I believed in my head. I was like, they're gonna send me, um, and I'm gonna be able to go do this stuff. Um, and it was like week after week they were saying the same thing. And I got into being like, I still had my hopes up even when we had left and we were on the way back to Hawaii. And then I remember one day realizing I'm Hawaii next week. They're not sending me. And so just feeling super dejected uh, about having trained for this one specific job and never getting to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You feel you feel like your time was wasted. You feel like an imposter. Um, but uh, so I didn't actually get to do very much there. We did that one op where I went to the other ship, and that was it.
Which was a lot of fun, by the way. It was
It was
awful, but it was a lot of fun.
it was awful. The toilet situation, that was um, during that time. That's already been brought. You know, turds were overflowing to like the toilets and stuff. It was just so.
Yeah, yeah, it was ugly.
Um,
Did I already tell the story about um did I already tell the story about having to explain to our staff in COIC about why you weren't getting Wi-Fi collect from?
no, that is a fun story, and I would tell it.
Yeah, please do, cuz god damn it. If that doesn't illustrate why well, actually I think I might have talked about it last interview with Crash, but please, cuz that's your bag, so I mean you can even elucidate on it better. But
Yeah.
God, please do tell that story.
Yeah. So RF, right? Um,
Radio
it
frequencies, by the way.
yeah, it it doesn't for radio battalion. We get these radio frequency courses all the time. It's like the default. Hey, give a hip pocket class course sergeant, and they're like, all right, I'll do it in RF theory. Like the one of the very first, very um, you know, fundamental pieces of information about RF is that a dipole antenna, which is the type of antenna that you most think of when you think of an antenna. It's just the straight line type thing. It's the thing that you get on, most routers, Wi-Fi routers, that is. Um, it propagates in a donut. Um, the thing about donuts is they have holes, and in the top of the bottom of the hole, there's nothing. Um, and that's how RF is. So if you point a Wi-Fi antenna, like a magic wand, at somebody, um, you're not going to get a lot of your phone's not going to be able to connect for your signal strength goes down, all that fun physics jazz. On top of that, so the higher the frequency, um, the more data that you can put. However, the higher the frequency, the so
The shorter what?
um,
You cut out.
the range,
Oh yeah.
the shorter the range of the propagation. So that's why you can get like FM signals from far, far away. That's why you lose Wi-Fi signal when you leave your driveway, right? Wi-Fi has very much higher range.
A much higher frequency, lower range.
Or yeah, much lower range, higher frequency than some of your other radio frequencies that you most consider. Well, putting that all together, so they wanted to send me on this operation, and I'm getting briefed on what they want to do with this, and I'm like, this isn't, you know, really feasible. This is not possible.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, without, really like some ridiculous gear that we just don't have. And they're like, well, it's not impossible because we've already briefed it. And the long short of it is you're going to do this mission. And
And
I'm
it's gonna
like,
work, and you're gonna have results, or
right.
else.
Right, and I was like, "Well, I'll set it up, man." But and I as a corporal at the time, am sitting there face to face with this master sergeant who, as a master sergeant, is the specific track of E8 in the military, or specifically the Marine Corps, where you're supposed to have some subject matter expertise. And I'm sitting here trying to get across these basic RF frequency fundamentals or whatever. And I'm sitting there saying, I'm like, okay, Master Sergeant, you get Wi-Fi on your phone from your house, right? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, and it's all good when you're right next to the router, right? And he's like, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm like, so can you connect to your router? And he's like, well, no. I was like, well, where do you live? He was like, oh, I live, right next to the battalion. Like, so that's you would say about 5 miles, right?
Something
He's
like
like,
that.
yeah. And I was like, so when do you stop? When does your phone disconnect from your Wi-Fi? He was like, oh, when I'm probably down the street a little ways. I'm like, that's what you're asking me to do. Like you lose Wi-Fi from your phone when you leave the street. So there's no way that is it going to be possible?
Yeah.
uh, and then that's what he told me. He was like, it's going to be possible because we've already briefed it.
And you're like,
I was like,
cool.
yeah. I was like, well, you're asking me to break the laws of physics here. There's not really anything that I can do here. He was like, well, we can amp it. And I was like, "There's
No, we can't.
no."
No, we can't.
Uh,
So,
um,
Master Sergeant, what you're telling me is you need me to go out and get a suntan at 2 o'clock in the morning because you told somebody that it was possible already,
right,
and they didn't. They, not knowing any better, were like, "Cool, yeah, we'll take this man at his word. He's a Master Sergeant." And you're like,
right,
"Well, hold on, no, I've been outside before. I know that's not possible." Yeah, that's
right.
Jesus Christ, what a fucking numpty.
And that's the thing is, and just like you said, that's not something that I would expect anybody to understand, except for somebody who's had 20 years of experience in the RF field, like in RF theory. Um, it it
Well, no, but the thing is, though, is there is such a frame of reference for Wi-Fi specifically. It's not like you're walking down the street or you're in the line at Chipotle and you're like, hey man, um, so I've got a ham radio, right? And
right,
so I'm really trying to get this VHF shot with this guy in like Saskatchewan, and I really think the only way I can reach him is by vectoring, past the through the ionosphere, which for the non-RF nerds is it's technically possible. It's a very inexact science, and it's 99.99% of the time a complete accident. But
yeah,
there are certain frequencies that if you shoot them up, they get trapped between the stratosphere and the ionosphere, and the signal just bounces around in like the upper atmosphere, and then eventually breaks through, shoots down toward Earth in a random direction, and it's it's insane and
it's
very.
rocket science
Yeah,
basically.
and it's almost impossible to predict. But it'd be different if I was like, "Hey man, I'm trying to get this comm shot with this dude on the other side of North America, and the only way I can do it is vectoring. What do you think?" And he's
Yeah,
like, "Well, what?
yeah.
What are you talking about?" But everybody has a smartphone. Most people have Wi-Fi. Well, not everybody has a smartphone, but like a huge percentage of the population has smartphones and Wi-Fi. It's pretty fucking common knowledge that if you're 10 miles from your house, you can't pull up your home Wi-Fi network and be like, "Sweet, don't have to use data." Like,
Right.
no, it's like any idiot. If I'm like, "Hey man, I need you to connect to my home Wi-Fi to fuck with something on my like Ring doorbell or something," oh cool. How are we like? Is it right there next to us? No, it's on the other side of town. Like, okay, you fucktard. No, I can't
Yeah.
do that. Like,
Right.
that's why it was so like intellectually reprehensible to me. Because I was like,
Yeah.
you don't need on top, like completely barring the fact that yeah, he had 18 years in the Marine Corps specifically, specific to our actual job field, and should be able to answer questions about something like getting a VHF comm shot, from the other side of the state. Like there are other master sergeants, Top Brown, for example. If I sat down with Top Brown and I'm like, "Hey man, can we like, do you think you could sit down with me and draw up some schematics for like a self-amplified log periodic or something, and we can shoot like this insane shot at like Camp Lejeune? Like, do you think we can make that happen without satcom?" He'd probably be like, "Yeah man, give me an afternoon, but we can figure it out." But
Yeah.
like, that's what a master sergeant who's supposed to be a subject matter expert should be like, not some like absolute fucking ninny who, if you're like, "Hey, we probably can't do this," he's like, "No, we can, because
I
already
have already briefed it.
I already told the people in charge of us that we can do that." And instead of looking like a big dumb idiot, or not even looking like a big dumb idiot, and just going back in and being like, "Hey, my bad, my subject matter expert was like, hey, that's
That's not possible.
physically fucking impossible.
Yeah.
We can, we're going to have to, scratch that one specific capability and run the mission, in a different
Otherwise.
direction." Yeah, doing literally anything else.
Yeah.
And, they'd probably be like, "Okay, well, I mean, you maybe should have known that. Maybe, but, we can make it work."
No,
Instead
it's
of
not
doing
like you
that,
got a brief.
yeah. Instead of doing that, he's like, "Yeah, no, just figure it the fuck out."
Yeah.
Raw Master Sergeant or some shit.
Yeah.
Ugh,
It,
God.
anyway, um, that was it. Uh, I just dealt with that, and you know, with certain people like that, you know, when you're telling them that stuff, when you're telling them that it's not possible, they can't comprehend what you're saying outside of excuse me, outside of you being disrespectful. Um, and so they just think that you're saying that you can't do this as a spite or something like that, and it is what it is.
Yeah. So
Anyway,
we get back from deployment, and um, we all get kind of parsed out to different places in
yeah,
battalion.
and I'm at this time I'm in a unique situation from most of the people in the battalion because I showed up to the deployment um really fresh, and I had a shorter school, the linguists, so I had about a year longer than what everybody else had before they had to PCS or EAS. Um,
Which is
and
move or get the fuck out of Dodge.
right. So lucky enough, um, the I'd positioned myself to be um, a CNE instructor because all the CNE instructors when I got there had moved on to different things except for this core group of people.
Mm.
And when I was getting back, I was going to be the only one to have deployed with this billet, this capability. That's all, just deployed. Didn't actually do mission, but I deployed with this stuff, and I had the benefit of having been certified, which all the cert guys had been gone. So um, I really pigeonholed myself into doing this because this is what I wanted to be doing, since before I even left on I wanted to come back and I wanted to be a CNE instructor. And I got that wish. I got back and they sent me over. Um, and it's a breath of fresh air. Like everything that you say, you miss the boys a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's a breath of fresh air to get back and be a part of something different and part of something that you enjoy. And when I got there, you know, the people that were around me were super competent and super knowledgeable, not only in the um,
The subject
in
matter.
like yeah, in the subject matter of CNE, but also super competent as teachers and as instructors. The person that I became closest to, David Egley, he had like been a high school band teacher, so um, he was no stranger to teaching people, especially teaching pretty complex concepts, it's a certain skill set because anybody can teach somebody how to write a resume, I guess. But when you get really into the weeds with technical stuff, it um, really have to have a lot with people, not understanding things, and you have to frame things in ways that it's hard for you to understand, but it gets them there.
Mm.
And the people that I work with, specifically shouting out, like I said, David Egley and Roland Thomas and um, Bo Parham. Those guys, when I came back, uh, they were super competent and they were really good at what they did. And I still had this mindset that I got from Scott. He, me out that day is like, you can hate everything about the organization, but you can be so good at what you do, and that's where I wanted to be. Like, at this point, with everything that I'd been through, I hated the Marine Corps, and I hated the situation that I'd put myself in. While I was on deployment, a recruiter took advantage of me being gone and like got Brittany to sign meth paperwork, so she was on the way to boot camp right as I got back.
Yeah,
Um,
fuck that guy.
yeah, and they knew exactly what they were doing. They waited for me to have been on the ship for a while, to where I wasn't gonna have phone calls very often. And then they didn't make it super clear what she was doing, and that just that whole situation left a terrible taste in my mouth. Um, and we all tried to get her to stop or whatever, but I knew it had been something she'd wanted to do for a while.
Because her dad
And
was a Marine, right?
her dad's a Marine, and her grandpa, who she was really close to, was in the Navy. And I was a Marine, and you know, I hated that she wanted to do because I knew a couple things. One, I knew my experience in the Marine Corps wasn't representative of. I actually had it, um, despite everything that we say in this podcast. I had it pretty easy.
Yeah.
Uh,
I make a point of trying to say that we did have it pretty easy. It
yeah,
was it was miserable in its own way because it felt like for most of it it wasn't so much miserable in the sense that like when a grunt goes to the field and gets rained on and has to shit in a bag, you know, that's
there it is.
yeah, I got to keep it going. Um, you know, when a grunt goes to the field and it starts pouring as soon as they get there and they're getting lifed out by a senior lance corporal or some other grunt bullshit, that's miserable. What we had was frustrating, which is
Yeah,
just um it's it sucks in its own manner because
yeah,
like that was one thing I learned in my entry level psychology course. But frustration comes from psychologically comes from being having an expectation be blocked, and it doesn't have to
right.
be an expectation about something you're going to be doing
Excuse
or the way something is going to feel or what. It's it can be any number of things, but when you anticipate something to be one way and then that is taken, that's the impetus for frustration. And I felt like that is more what defined our experiences in the Marine Corps because we get in and we're told it's going to be this. You're going to be the hardest dick pipe layers to ever walk the face of the planet. And
me.
then
Yeah,
you get to TSOC and you get to Texas. I joined to not go to college. I end up at language college, and I'm like,
yeah,
okay, well, I can't. I can't leave my barracks room without a buddy. Like I thought, my parents. I'm 18. I think I know everything. My parents have been treating me like an adult for a while. I feel like I should be treated with a certain level of respect or whatever, and they're treating me like a child. I
yeah,
endure that. I get to TSOC. It's even worse. I endure that. I get to battalion. I'm like, finally, I make it to this mythical fleet. This is going to be great. I
yeah,
immediately get stood up for this deployment. I'm like, thank fucking God I get to do something. I'm excited.
yeah,
I'm going to deploy and be a real Marine. I'm a real boy. And then, we get placed under the two out of the three, of our leaders were some of the most incompetent morons I've ever had the misfortune of sharing oxygen with. Like,
yeah,
so at every point I had this idea, whether I was told about it ahead of time or, I just had this idea of what it should be based on logic or whatever. And it just never seemed to, it just never seemed to be good enough. I always felt like I was like, well, as long as I just bite the bullet and hang in there now, when I get to this next stage, it'll be better. And it just never was. And I
and it
think,
never
and I
was.
think that's why it felt so awful was again I try to be really transparent about the fact that like I didn't see any of our friends get blown up. I didn't get blown up. Like we didn't come back from a deployment with 25% casualties. Like all things considered, it could have been so much worse and for so many different ways, but like it still was just so emotionally and mentally taxing to have tried to join this organization that's supposed to stand for X, Y, and Z, and instead your experience is A, B, and C.
Yeah.
They're just incompatible, and it was frustrating, but I think above all, it was just hugely disappointing.
Yeah.
It's like what you were saying, when we were on our way back, and you're like, I trained so much for this to do this one thing, and this was my one opportunity, which we were lucky to even get at all. A lot of people
Right.
that get to Radio Battalion don't deploy at
Never.
all,
Never.
which I feel would even be worse, maybe. But we got that one opportunity and that experience, and aside from that one little that one little thing that we did,
Blip. Yeah, the blip.
yeah, like we couldn't, like, it wasn't at all what we thought it was going to be or what we hoped it was going to be, and it just felt like all of the time and effort and the mental resilience that it took to get us through that entire time was for naught,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. But yeah, so I like one, I knew that, her seeing my time, I knew it wasn't going to be representative of her time for the most part. Um, you know, two, females just generally like they have different struggles than males do, and I knew about that.
Mm.
Um, but it's not like I could really push her into not doing it because she was doing it for all the reasons that I did it. Um, you know, she wanted to be really good at something. She wanted to be the best of the best, and the Marines are that. And her dad had been, no, he did like a 4-year enlistment, and that's how he identifies as a Marine.
Mm.
Um, and so she just grew up thinking like getting indoctrinated with the Marines being the best and wanting to do it. So with her having been there from the beginning, and a lot of people, when I say that word dual service, they're like, oh, found each other in the military. Nope, we actually grew up in the same street. That was before I was in. But so she knew me and she knew my motivations when she came. So for me to tell her to not join, I would be a hypocrite.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, I
and
mean, on the flip side, though, you could tell her not to join, be with the perspective of saying, like, hey, so the indoctrination that you've been going through your entire life, it's all bullshit.
yeah,
Like you totally, I don't feel
but
like that
then
would have been necessarily hypocritical.
right, but you know, it's a really really fine line to walk because um, let's say things went a different way and I convinced her otherwise. She would always have that. What if I join the Marine Corps?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember.
Why did he talk me out of it? So
Yeah.
um, there was no good way for me to say, hey, like I want you to live your life for you. I want you to make your decisions for me, but this is a great idea. And
Like you said, what? You cut out.
like I said, with her, he, took advantage of the situation.
Mm.
Like, he 100% knew that I was, and he percent knew that there was no way I was going to be able to call. And I got an email one day saying, "Hey, I'm MEPS and looking like I'm going to be able to get out of this. So I think I'm signed today." And I was like, "That's that."
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with that as soon as I get back. She's in boot camp. I'm sending her letters all the time. I'm trying to get through it. Telling her the stuff that I wish somebody would have told me. And one of the things, and here's a little piece for you kiddos out there who are thinking about making this a career still. It's a game. It's all just a game.
Mm.
And if you
Big time.
if you play it, you'll get through. But it's nothing more than that. It's just a game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm dealing with that. And I'm in this new job. Um, and Coop, like he said, he finagled his way over into our shop, and I was super happy with that.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember when that was going on. I was talking to you and you're like, "Yeah, so Coop just started showing up." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like,
yeah,
and you were like, "Well, he just wants
just
to
shows
be
up to the bay.
yeah, he just wants to be here." And I didn't know he actually and until he told me uh on his episode, I didn't know that he actually went up to the company office and bamboozled them into writing him up BSO paperwork.
100%, dude. It
That's
was
so
it was so
fucking funny.
good. It was so good. Um, but the thing about Coop was, uh, he didn't have a lot of time left. He had a whole time before I showed up.
Right.
So he didn't have as much time as I had left. So whereas he was kind of on his way out the door, I really kind of sunk teeth into the role that I was doing. So I take up these classes and I start teaching these classes, and it's looking like within a few months, it's not going to be too many of us left in the bay. It's going to be basically myself and David.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, well, if this is going to be my time to shine, I'm going to shine. And like with him and I, like that's the second time in the Marine Corps that I'm just genuinely really proud of my, because him and we took that course, which was, um, I guess the best word for it would be, rudimentary. It was like really patchy. Each class had been put together by somebody different, so there was no real flow, um, and it didn't really get you much because it wasn't a certification course.
Mm-hmm.
But the work that him and I and some of the Marines that were around us like really put into it made it like a really professional and like a good product to display that we were doing Italian. And it had its perks. Like we got to go out in civilian clothes once a month, and so that was cool. We got to do, all things considered, some really cool stuff in that class.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, like I said, I'm really proud of what I did there, and I'm still really close friends with David to this day. We go to each other's house. Um, we help each other projects and stuff. Um, we both this the next part of the story is when I go to MSSA. Um, that was one of the good strokes of luck in my life, because they were starting to lock down people leaving the battalion to do any type of like transition stuff.
Yeah.
And the way the paperwork came out, the way it was drawn up, I was ineligible for MSSA because my EAS date was 3 days shy of eligible for this MSSA class. And the next one that came out, I was, like 30 days out of being eligible for that one. And, with talking to all the right people, and they're like, well, the only way we're through this is if you have a written letter from command saying that you'll be able to take terminal leave. Um, that's the only way we're going to approve this. And I like typed something up and I walked up to the company office. And I was like, hey, I need somebody to sign this. I don't really care who it is. And like Mallerby was there, and he's like, sure, I'll sign it. I don't care if you go on terminal. And he's like, do do do.
Nice.
And you know that was a stroke of luck. Um, all things considered, I shouldn't have been able to be in that MSSA class, because I just had too much time left.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a year and 3 days left, and I was able to do it. And I did MSSA, which I've said that a couple times. It's the Microsoft Software Systems Academy, which is a transition program for Marines getting, out of the Marine Corps, and trying to transition into tech jobs. The one that I did specifically was server cloud administration, and I did it all in Camp Pendleton. And I went in this class, and I was, you know, there were people who are smarter than me in that class. Um, but I made it my goal to, if I wasn't going to be the smartest in the room, and I was going to, have projects to show by the end of it, so hopefully I could get a job afterwards. The only thing that they promise you is, a one interview with somebody at Microsoft.
Mm.
That's all they promise. And I was like, well, you know, if I'm going to get out, I got to have a plan. So, I worked my tail off in the class, and I met, great people. And we got through, and I interviewed with Microsoft, and was and I was able to negotiate, which is a blessing in itself. And while I was in MSSA, found out that I was pregnant with Grace.
That you found out what? Sorry.
Brittany was pregnant with Grace,
Mm.
and so that that ups the pressure a lot
Yeah, it's like
to
what
get.
Rusty said. Did you hear that episode?
Yeah, I did. Really,
Once you're gonna be a dad, you got to get that money.
yeah. And so, once I found that out, like, it was a new demeanor going into class. Like it was like it was you know it was like it went from this would be nice to this needs to happen.
Yeah.
And so I flipped the switch on that, and I was doing stuff in my free time to try to stand up these projects so I can have something to show up. And I was helping the other people in the class as much as I could. And you know you get a lot of resume help, and so my stuff was spot on. And so I was able to get the interviews with Microsoft second rounds. And I interviewed with Amazon, and I got two offers. And it was when I got the offer from Microsoft that you know it finally came, that I felt like I'd done it, and I like made it. You
Mm-hmm.
know
I wonder what that's
that
like.
thing that yeah. Well, like you think you're gonna get it when you get to the fleet. You think you're gonna get it when you get to TSOC. I'd never got that. Even getting back from it, I didn't feel like I'd made it.
Yeah.
But getting the phone call and hearing the offer, um, I made it, and I knew at that point like things were going to be great. Um, we were going to be able to move closer to, um,
Because
and
Cam's from Virginia,
Virginia. Yeah, my
and
family's from Richmond, and I work in Reston, so work is about 3 hours from
yeah,
Richmond. So I live about an hour out of work. Uh, it's a good commute, but I mean, I don't mind it. Got a beautiful house. Brittany gave birth, and Grace is
the cutest.
the cutest, but like it's one of those cliche things. But you don't you the love that you feel for a child. It's not something that's even fathomable before you have a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so having Grace just completely changed my life. Um, but it came with a lot of hardship.
Yeah.
Brittany, at this point, at the time that I was getting out, Brittany had been in for about a year and a half, and she, was starting, and she got placed in the only command I can think would have been worse than ours.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I want to have
and
if she's open to it, I'd love to have her on the show as well.
yeah, I mean, she'd be open to it. She has a whole different story than I do, and she had a lot worse in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But the long short of it is her command was, resentful of her from the because they knew that at that point I was a sergeant. So she didn't come in as green as most PFCs Lance Corporals do, because she knew kind of how things were. working, and she knew like that there was only so much that they could do without it being like a hazing incident. Like,
Right.
um, and so um, they knew of me. They did not like me. I went to a family day, and her whatever NCO and her staff NCO, and they were like, so you staying in the house? Like, no. And I said it just like, and I like just made it into a joke, and oh, and they just kind of snickered and sneered. Um,
Yeah. I
and
remember that.
and they thought I was a piece of crap because I wanted to get out. But like the irony there was that because they thought that because I was wanted to get out that I was a piece of crap. But in the same month, I was like the NCO of the Corps and Marine of the month. I had more in spots than our battalion commander.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't know anything about me. Like, they just, you know, they had this idea of me because I wanted to get out, and they wanted to, you know,
Here, hold on
and
one sec, dude.
yeah.
What? My keys? Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I love you. We'll be done soon. Sorry, Lexi needed my car keys. Okay, so where are we
But
at?
yeah. So they just had this idea of me that was just completely unfounded because I'm not going to toot my own horn here, but um, I did what I set out to do.
Yeah.
I hated the job, but I was pretty excellent at it. I was a really good teacher. Like I said, I became the Marine of the Month and the NCO of the Corps, and so like other people knew that I was good. I was really tight with my leadership, um, so much so that they wrote me up. So they had this idea of me, and they really just wanted to punish Brittany because they thought that I was, you know, garbage. They thought I was crap Marine because I wanted to get out,
Mm-hmm.
and also because she wasn't shaking in her boots to talk to an NCO. Like she talked to him like with respect, but she knew like she had a healthy level of respect. Um, and they didn't feel like that was enough. That she should be terrified of NCOs. Um, and she knew from you and from me because she lived with us that's just plain ridiculous. That you can have a respectful relationship without being shook all the
Yeah.
time.
Well, you shouldn't. I mean, that's a
Right.
symbol of poor leadership is relying on rank and the fear of retribution to be able to to be able to exact your will on somebody.
And that's all that they relied on.
Yeah.
Like, um they were just terrible.
And she
And
was
on
injured at the time, right?
Yeah, she had hurt her hip, um and she had like a tear in her cartilage, and they were still trying, like she had been put on Limdu, and they were trying to send her
Limdu being limited duty, which
limited
is
duty.
a doctor's note saying don't do
Don't
anything
do anything.
strenuous because you are hurt.
Right. The irony, and she'll tell the better than I did, but her staff NCO made her feel like a garbage can. He was like, "Well, you can't just go to the range. Like, I don't see why you're like prevents you from going to the range." And she was like, "Well, it's specifically laid out, shit. So I'm not gonna go against my limb dude shit uh, to go to the range." And he was like, "Well, you're not even a real Marine." But the irony is, her like the sergeant that was ahead of her, like below the staff sergeant, like failed the range 3 times, and he swept that under the rug. And she's still in the Marine Corps. Like she is actually a terrible Marine. Like you
Yeah.
have to. It's not like Brittany went and then failed. It's she can't go.
Yeah. And the other thing too for the non-military people is like the, the Marine Corps range is the most difficult range of the different branches. It's still pretty fucking easy.
Yeah.
Like
It,
unking or like not unqualifying or unking as it's like derisively referred to, you have to be really
so bad.
fucking bad.
But
Really
but
bad.
the thing about it is Brittany couldn't do it because she can't lay on her stomach 500
Yeah.
because her hip is broken. like,
Yeah.
so and they just made her feel like crap until the day she got out. Um, and so that's been really tough. And then having a baby is not easy for the dad, but especially not mom.
Yeah.
And so I get out and I'm doing my best to juggle all this stuff. Thank God I work for Microsoft because they've been a blessing in my life. Working for that company has been the blessing of my life in the most critical time. Because I was given like a really generous paternity leave. I was able to go off and take care of Brittany and take care of Grace for 3 months, which is a ridiculous amount of time when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Comparatively, um, shout out, paternity leave should be federally um, authorized, whatever. Uh, that's a different thing. Um, but during this time after having Grace and stuff, or, for all intents and purposes, I was the most blessed person on earth. You know, Grace didn't have colic
Mm-hmm.
or doesn't have colic. You know, she's been sleeping through the night since 4 months. Um, she's the greatest baby that you can ask for. I'm out of the Marine Corps. Um, I have a really well-paying job with great benefits, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the field that I love. And you have all these benefits, and you feel like you should be happier. You feel like you should feel more blessed than what you are. But there's just a lot of stuff that I never dealt with, and you know, a lot of stuff that was weighing heavily on me. Because, like I said, even though Grace is the greatest baby, um, like no matter what I was doing, I never felt like I was doing a lot. Like I never felt like I was doing anything enough, being a good, great father. Um, and I didn't feel like I was doing enough to be a great husband, even though I had all this time off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, you, you know, I got out of the Marine Corps and I didn't see combat. And I had a great job when I got back from deployment with great people. And I deployed with my immediate group of people that were also like some of the greatest people I've known. So why is it that when you get out, or when I've gotten out, that I feel so terrible time?
Mm-hmm.
Um, like to go back to it, like I felt like everything good I don't rate.
Yeah.
It's thing. It's different. It's different um, than how you expect it to be. I got out, and you know there was a lot of stuff that I didn't realize that I was feeling while I was in. But I held a lot of resentment for a lot of people back, at home. Um, People that I thought I was
You thought you were
uh,
what?
really close with,
Uh-huh.
that, as it turns out, I wasn't very close with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and people who I thought really had my back, um, who I thought of as like, you know, brothers to me and family to me. Like wouldn't even didn't even call me when my baby was born, or hasn't called me since. Um, People that I was really involved with the church before I joined. I thought I was doing this super noble thing, but a lot of them, like, it's like they lost my number. Um, and it's hard. It's hard to go through the Marine Corps and you know have your eyes open to different perspectives and start to consider those different perspectives. So, one, you know, like politically, I lean different, and I feel like because of that, people like I got somebody today who backbone because I don't think exactly how he does, which is silly, but these people that
Such as
I
public discourse in 2020.
right, but these people that I thought you know at least if not for anything, but for the work that I put in when I was doing that all throughout my teenage years, and then I just fall off the map and go do the Marine Corps thing. You would think when I got back that I wasn't expecting like a standing ovation, but, a text would be good or something like that. And
Yeah.
so I was really feeling the weight of that. And
Yeah, you kind of, not to cut you off, but just kind of to piggyback off what the CO said. Um, I found that to be the case as well, where a lot of um, a lot of my friends, I kind of started to realize were not very good friends while I was in, because I would like go home during spring or during like Christmas break or something, and you know, I'd live 20 minutes from these people that I haven't seen in forever, and
they want you to drive to them.
yeah, and it's like,
You
well,
have
I
to meet them where
also,
they are.
yeah, it's like, well, I just flew 400 miles or whatever to get back to the city, but I mean, okay, you go off, dude. But like,
Yeah.
and I'll admit that like a lot, I changed a lot, and I was also that, um especially earlier in my Marine Corps career, I was that, very hard-headed, proud, um you know Marine stereotype, essentially, that's like, well, you know i I have it harder than my friends that went straight to college on mommy and daddy's dime, because they're stressing about finals and I'm getting ready for a deployment, and like blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So admittedly, a lot of them probably just didn't want to
You
hang
were
out with me
insufferable.
because I was
Yeah.
fucking obnoxious as fuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I found, even before I was that way, like when I came home on boot leave, you know it was it was on Christmas. Like I did recruiter's assistance on Christmas,
Yeah.
like around Christmas time. So all of my
Same.
friends were home from college, and I think I saw like maybe two people, maybe three,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, it was kind of a revelation to find that the vast majority of the people that I considered to be like family to me when I was in high school, I
Yeah.
really was only close to them because I saw them 5 days a week at school.
Right.
And that was a lonely realization, especially because when you get out of the Marine Corps and it's
You get
different.
dumped. Yeah, you get dumped off back in the same spot.
Yeah, but it's
And
like,
you
and you have these amazing, unique relationships with the people that you served with, like these really tight friendships born out of, shared suffering and, shared experience and perspective and stuff like that. And then those people don't drop you the way that, um, a lot of the people from high school do, at least in my experience, but they're just not around. Like you can't,
yeah.
it's not, you do see them way less frequently, but they're just not immediately available the way you're accustomed to. So like that, that's one thing that I try to talk about and start a dialogue about, is that the sense of loneliness and isolation that comes from getting out of the Marine Corps and finding yourself back in the same spot that you were in before you joined is fucking crushing sometimes
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
like, all of my really good friends are in Virginia, or Scott's in Colorado, and Rusty's in San Bernardino, which is like, it's still Southern California, but California is the size of most fucking European countries. Like, he's not a hop, skip, and a jump away. I can't just go,
Right.
you know what I mean? Or like
Yeah.
Brandon's in Tampa, Micah's in Montana, like all of the Coop's back in fucking Milwaukee now. So it's like all of the boys that lived within a 50-yard stretch of barracks hallway
Yeah.
for the majority of my time, or within a 10-foot stretch of fucking berthing. We're stacked
Yeah.
on top of each other, like we're sleeping on fucking empty toilet paper shelves at Costco right now.
Yeah.
And like, they're just not there, and it's not any fault of their own. Like, I don't fault anybody, but it's like, you get out and you're like, oh, it's gonna be so great, like I'm gonna be able to do whatever I want whenever I want, and then you're like, well, I'm fucking alone, just
Yeah.
alone. So
But yeah, I was feeling, you know, the worst parts of that.
yeah.
Um, and because mostly because I'd realized how much denial I'd been in
Mm,
about it, because I there were relationships that, you know, I kept alive. Like, I kept stoking that fire every time.
mm-hmm,
And it took some, like, other really close people to me, like Devin, who lives with me. He's like my brother. He knocked some sense into me. He's like, "Hey man, why are you like, you're the only one, this is one-sided. Like, from the outside looking in, it's not like they're doing anything for you. Like, they're not going out of their way for you." And that came to a head when, my baby was born. Didn't get a text from a lot of people. Um, but like Devin, so Brittany went into labor at 2, and Devin was living in Richmond, and I texted him at 2:15, and he was at the hospital in the room at like 3:15, or like sooner than that. He screamed down the to be there for my daughter's, birth, because
mm-hmm,
he wanted to be there for me. And I appreciate him for that. And like I said, Devin's, uh, and I could see where he was there, but it seemed like everything else was gone. Um, and on top of all these emotions, and I said about the military, I felt like the emotions I was having on top of having didn't deserve to have. I had that guilt
mm-hmm.
that the other guys had talked about, because like I didn't see combat, and I was like, why am I having these feelings? Uh, and then all of those feelings came to a peak, um, when Granddaddy passed. Uh,
Yeah.
so my granddad was the, he was the top man in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get to know him all of my life, due to just some of the family nonsense or whatever. But the years that I did know him, he was like, you know, he was the model
Yeah.
that I wanted to be. Vietnam era, airborne.
Airborne.
Um, yeah, 101st Airborne, um, POW. You know, just the baddest of the bad. And he traveled the world. He did so much stuff. He was like a dancer when he was a teenager. Um, you wouldn't know it by looking at me, but he's like Rican. And he was it for me. And you know we knew that he'd been on a decline for a while, and then he went, and everything in me came to a head in that moment when I got that phone call. Just, I felt, even though I was close, like Brittany was here and Grace was here, like I felt so, um, and I felt like there was nothing that I was really especially well. Um, you know, like I talked about work and how great it is, but I'm like, you go to work at Microsoft, you're not the smartest person in the um,
Yeah.
they're and so everything that you do you through, and like I felt like fumbling in there, and I felt like I was dad, and as a husband, I was like, and then granddaddy, who was the greatest gift a man since sliced bread in my own eyes, like he was just gone.
Yeah.
um and so like I haven't admitted it to anybody except for you and Brittany, but like you know I didn't really have a plan to in my life, but I was taking steps in that direction. um like I told myself, I'm going to sign up for this bone marrow transplant stuff to be a donor, and I'm going to try to be a kidney donor and give as much of myself, and then just see where that leads me. And I just, for a time there, you know, it felt like that would have been illogically, but the best option, um, because I felt so worthless, and I felt like I was just such a disappointment to everybody, even though nobody was giving me that indication.
Yeah.
Like Brittany, like she's such an awesome, and Grace is such an awesome kid. And I have really great friends like you. I just felt like such like like a failure. Um,
Yeah.
I was questioning why I ever, like I was obviously an idiot for doing it. And then if I hadn't have done it, then maybe Brittany wouldn't have done it, and she wouldn't have gotten so hurt and so broken over that. And
Oh,
you know,
because you were questioning why you joined the Marine Corps.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
and it was a really tough time.
Yeah.
And I brought it up to Brittany that I was thinking stuff, um, and she was there for me, and you know, her and I both are getting help for it now. But
That's good, man. I'm
uh,
proud of you.
well, the that's the reason why I wanted to come on, is because like the some of the heavy stuff that you've talked about, the other people that have been on, is that how you don't feel like you deserve these feelings,
Mm.
and that's you know I'm the person who deserves them the least. I've like I said, objectively and logically, I have the most going for me right now. I'm living the best years of my life, and I just didn't want to be here anymore. Um,
Well,
and I
but it's it's insidious. That feeling is insidious in the sense that it's like I was talking with like with Coop about it. Is it feels like you have to think of it like a disease. Like it isn't
yeah,
rational. It isn't logical. I was like when I was having my hardest time was like right around when we came to visit you guys.
yeah,
And it was because it was similar in the sense that I felt completely useless as a person because
right,
I was like, okay, let's take stock of my life right now. I'm 20. I was 24. 24. Yeah, I was 24 at the time, and you know, I had a pretty easy go of it in the Marine Corps. I joined to pay for college, and at that time I think I had taken the semester off because the semester before then I was like really not in a good mental space, and I was taking like 15 units and working. The GI Bill had been delayed or something, so I
Yeah.
had to take out a bunch of debt, which I'm still in to this day, and to be able to, because Lexi and I had just moved out
Yeah.
into our own apartment, and so I had to be, and we moved out into this apartment under the assumption that we were going to be getting like $2,400 a month or whatever from the GI Bill, because Southern
Right.
California rent is unbelievable. So we go and do that. We didn't plan well enough. We pulled the trigger too early. We move out. Suddenly, I'm not getting GI Bill payments. I'm up to my eyeballs in debt. I'm taking 15 units of school. I'm literally losing money being alive because
Right.
I was still working over 40 hours a week while taking 15 units at a restaurant, which pays but doesn't pay that well. And so I was like, and we literally, I was gaining debt every month. Like, no matter how frugal we were, like, we literally were eating, egg drop top ramen for dinner like 4 nights a week. Like,
Right.
it was struggle city. And I was like, okay. And, I, none of my friends were around. You had moved by then. And, you know, you were doing great. Like, obviously, I didn't know you were having such a hard time, but I was like, we did essentially the same things, had similar career paths, and he's making probably 7 times as much money as I am doing something that he loves in in the job field, that he, is like perfect for. And so, it was really selfish of me, and I felt really selfish feeling that. I was like I shouldn't be envious of my best friend who has worked so much to get to where he is, but I'm and then Lexi and I elected to break our lease, move back in with her mom and with her mom and family. And so I'm like, now I'm 24, directionless, and I'm basically renting a room from my girlfriend's parents.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck am I doing, dude? Like, what am I do like what am I doing with my life? And so, but again, I had a place to live. I was still getting a college education, which is something a lot of people can't do. I'm ambulatory, you know. I think I'm healthy. I haven't been to the doctor in a while, but as far as I know, I'm pretty healthy. And I still felt like I was just this like just this waste, just a complete
Yeah.
oxygen scrubbing waste. And looking back on it, there definitely was a lot to feel grateful for, because we could have been homeless. We could have not had the support system that we had in Lexi's immediate family being right here and ready to help us out. It could have been 100 times worse if you're looking at it logically or rationally. But the thing is those feelings and your that impairment of your self-worth, like the way that you view yourself, is not, it ignores logic and it ignores reason
Yeah.
completely. And that's, I think, the one of the more dangerous things about it is, especially when it gets to the point that you were at, which I'm very thankful that you're still here. um
And I am too.
yeah,
Like,
I'm
it
glad.
was, it's looking back, when I was thinking that stuff, it's not like I was really thinking about, leaving Grace without a dad, thinking about leaving Brittany without a husband,
Mm-hmm.
or leaving you without a best friend, depending on me. um,
Well, I
But
mean, that probably that would have if that had
but
happened, I don't know where I would be right now.
I know, but it's I wasn't. It's illogical and it's um, irrational, like you're saying. And in the when you're feeling like that, you don't feel like it is, but you're not thinking of other people. I struggle with selfish. Um, because you're thinking that in that moment that you being gone would help the people around you. You think that being gone would alleviate other people's problems or alleviate being a burden to other people in your life because you feel like you're so much of a burden. So I hesitate to say that it's selfish, but it's not thinking rationally about the effects that it would have.
Yeah.
Um, Selfish is, too harsh of a. It's just it's a label that's harshly put on thoughts like that, and I don't think it really gets at uh, what it is, what you're feeling in those moments. But I would say, um, you lose the ability because you are already being lose the ability to rationally think about the other people in your life that
Yeah.
not being around would affect. So,
Yeah, 100%.
um, and like I said, you know, the sun comes up, right? I I was able to talk about it to Brittany, who I trust the most, and I was able to talk with you, um, like I said, as my best friend, and Devin. Um, but uh, and after that, it's not like that thought goes away overnight or anything like that. But um, now that I've talked to people, whenever I'm having it, I can say, "Hey, babe, you know, I'm I'm in those thoughts," and she can help get me back to, "Hey, you know, we need you here. Like you are not unimportant. You are of we need you around. We love you, and it's not like we just need you, but we want you to be here."
Yeah.
And so, um, it's a super cliche thing, but the first step when you're having these thoughts like this is to just have somebody that you can tell, so they can help recognize when you're there, and so it's not like you're closed up in your. But eh, not but it's that's just where we are now. I'm doing a lot better, and for my dad who's probably watching this, I don't want you to worry, um, because I'm doing better. Um, I still grieving granddaddy being gone, and I'm still working out some of the issues with how things went down in the Marine Corps, and still trying to help Brittany get to where she needs to be. Um, but you know, I felt like me saying that was important because there are other people, may it's always been easy for me to separate the emotional, and for other people who are like that for me, the logical side of you says, um, you should be the most grateful person on the world. So why are you fighting with yourself for feeling so worthless all the time?
Yeah.
um, if there's anybody else who just you're not you're not any less deserving of those feelings than anybody else. um, and talking about it isn't a point of shame.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
and
And
you shouldn't feel like it is.
yeah. And I think that's hard for people to internalize. um, because it really was for me. I felt very like Lexi had to drag it out of my ass.
Yeah.
Um, like sh- it took me being a pretty like abject asshole for like months and just not doing anything, like just playing video games and like eating like shit and not doing anything, which is not I'm not the most self-driven person in the world. I'm very obsessive. Like if I find something I'm really big on, I'll like obsess over it and just fucking full steam ahead at it until I get bored.
True.
But I'm not the first. Like people don't think of me when they're like, let's list off people that get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and work out and then go to work. Like I'm not that
Yeah.
person. I've never been, and
Right.
it's and that's I'm working with it. But it's she could even tell that it wasn't in my character to be acting the way that I was.
Yeah.
And it took her kind of like smacking me on the forehead and being like, "Hey, idiot, like something's wrong with you." Like not that I have a character flaw or something, but she's like, "You are not acting like yourself. You need to we need to figure out what the fuck is going on because
Right.
you are not you right now." And it took kind of that wake up call because I was just in this like cloud of, I was just going in a circle with blinders on. And I was like, I would wake up every day, like feel guilty about not doing anything like overly productive or something the day before, be so like bummed out and unenergetic and apathetic that I would do nothing that day and then go to sleep and feeling guilty and self-destructive about the fact that I didn't do anything that day either, every single day. And so I was like, it took a long time to really internalize the fact that I wasn't okay, and then even longer to feel comfortable talking about it with you and with Phil and Cooper and Scott. That was like the first, and until this podcast, really like the only people that I was like, openly like, yeah, I don't fucking know what I'm doing with my life. Like I don't know, what I'm supposed to be doing or why I'm feeling, the things I'm feeling. Like I had a direction, I don't anymore. Like I don't know what to do or what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
it took a really, really long time to get there, you know, in the span of, my post military career. But I think a lot of what I was feeling was a holdover from, like you said, it was a lot of stuff that you'd been going through, feelings that you'd had since you were in, but you just never really addressed it because it was the norm. And
Yeah.
and and then in retrospect, it was the norm because everybody was feeling that,
Yeah.
and so, but it took a really long time to and that kind of clearer mindset, and that kind of once the fog lifted a little bit, to kind of be like, holy shit, like that took a long time for me to really take to heart and be okay with the fact that I'm feeling these things, I'm working through it, but that a lot of other people are. And that's, I keep harping on it, but that's the whole point of why I'm doing this, is because that message that you wanted to get out, which I know you've been playing close to the chest for a long time. And, I'm really proud of you for being comfortable getting this out to, not a lot of people, but, to people that,
You're
don't.
gonna make it big.
I hope so, man. I feel like I feel like that message right there could, is invaluable to people because, my last interview with Crash, he was saying that, he had reached a suicidal point as well, but he wasn't so much taking an active role as in having kind of a fatalistic disregard for his own safety,
Yeah.
where it's more
Yeah.
of a passive, you know, a passive disregard for your own life. And
Yeah.
Coop
And
had it.
that's closer to what I would like I said, I wasn't on the route of like on this day at this time and you know
Yeah.
my brains out or anything like that, but um you know so I don't know that that's going to be the line that people are like, oh well, he's fine, I guess. But
Well, no, I
but
mean, but the thing is once you reach that point of devaluing your place in your own world, in my opinion, you're there. Like, you don't
yeah,
have to necessarily go buy a gun or be tying a noose or whatever.
right,
I don't think. I think that's an archaic way of looking at it. So is
yeah,
the idea that suicide is selfish. Like, in my opinion, suicide is the final symptom of you know serious chronic depression.
yeah,
That's it's not I don't think it's selfish because, like we've said, you aren't thinking rationally. You're not sitting down with a legal pad going pros column,
yeah,
every whatever, cons column, blah 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 blah. You're not
yeah,
you're not there. So, in my opinion, as soon as you feel that your life has no value, you are suicidal. And
yeah,
that's it doesn't have to be active, but it's also you're redeemable. And I think that more people need to be honest with themselves about what they're feeling, because I think that was the biggest problem that I had. Is one of the best things that I have taken away from our friendship is stoicism. And
yeah.
I've started really reading Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and a lot of the classic Stoics, and it has helped me a lot in certain avenues. And if any of you don't know what Stoicism is, it's essentially the distillation of Stoicism would basically be, you are the rock that the lighthouse is on, and you stay that rock no matter what the tide is like.
That analogy's not going to fall with people.
Well,
I'll
what do you think then?
um so another so if we're using modern, terminology, there's a school called cognitive behavioral therapy that draws a lot of stoicism, and the core tenet is, you cannot affect the things that happen to you, or the events in your life. The only thing that you can affect is how you react to them,
Yeah.
and the action that you take. So, um, so
Well, that was just my
you
analogy, is
yeah,
that the rock can't make the tide stop.
right,
It's just That's just the tide. It's going to do what it's going to do.
right. But and a lot of there's philosophical ideas that go with it. One of the major ones is just really, really, being aware of how you're feeling about a certain thing, and taking measures to not allow it to cloud your judgment. So like one of the like the most base things, like most base stoic practice, is to not make any decision while really angry or really hungry or really horny,
Hmm.
um, because those are super cloudy types of um, states that you can be.
Yeah.
So so
Well,
that so but that's what it comes from.
yeah. Well, all I was going to say about stoicism per se is that the it's a really great approach for managing yourself,
Yeah.
but there are also situations and scenarios where the outside stimulus is what needs to be changed in order for you to make progress in your mental health. So, for
Yeah.
example, like a really quick one is when I got my new job at this brewery, I was fortunate enough, plus the GI Bill, to be able to quit my previous job at a
Yeah.
restaurant. And I immediately felt 1,000 fucking times better because
Yeah.
that restaurant is circling the drain. And I hope while nobody's in it, while we're all in quarantine, it explodes. It's horrible. And,
Yeah.
like Lexi and her brother both, since we, they got laid off because of all the quarantine shit.
Quarantine. Yeah.
Yeah, but their mental health has improved so much since we've been in
Good.
quarantine, which is
I'm
very
so happy.
counterintuitive.
Yeah.
They like, we all thought we would be, you know, dying, to put it not very well,
Yeah.
but we thought we would all be having a really hard time being stuck at home. They're happier than I've seen them in forever because they're not going in
They're not
and
at work. Yeah.
yeah, they're not going in and working for, you know, not the best management with, coworkers on a spectrum of, I'm trying to put this really lightly, but coworkers on a spectrum of usefulness and likability. Some of them are great and awesome, and some of them should be just like shot. I stopped trying to
Oh.
I stopped trying to put it lightly. They can, whatever. But and then they're also just not getting verbally abused by shitty people coming in and shitting down their throat for stuff outside of their sphere of influence, which is it. If you can distill working in a restaurant, that's what it is. You get paid to apologize to people for shit that's not your fault, and
Yeah.
it's not great for your
Yeah.
mental well-being and your self-worth. And in situations like that where you if you have the means to cut out or remove yourself from situations that you can recognize are having an adverse effect on you, fucking do it, man. Pull the trigger,
Yeah.
because I can tell you from relatively recent personal experience, it can seriously be a game changer. A lot of
Yeah.
the stuff that you especially were um, experiencing was obviously not the product of negative outside stimulus. Like you said, you have a great wife, beautiful child, great house, great job. That's not the kind of shit that you can um, remove from your life and expect it to have any kind of positive effect. And that's the kind of, it's situations like that where it is imperative that you reach out either to somebody you trust or a licensed therapist. Bear in mind, I am not a psychologist nor a psychiatrist. I'm a dummy with a microphone.
Yeah.
Like I talk for a living, and I like talking to people about their experiences, and I feel like things that we and you and I and the people that I've interviewed thus far and I'm hoping to interview soon, the things that we have experienced are pertinent to other people, and we are intelligent and articulate enough to make it digestible for other people and applicable to their lives. Um, I I'm not a psychologist. Go see one if you think you need
Yeah.
to, because not everybody not everybody has a support system like we have necessarily.
Yeah.
It took Lexi kicking me in the dick to get me to fucking get my ass in gear. It took you having the intestinal fortitude and the clarity, a moment of clarity to go to Brittany and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. I need help. And
Yeah.
thankfully, and I loved her before. I love her even more now. She can, she's there for you to say, listen, we love you and we want you here. Unfortunately, not
Yeah.
everybody has the means to cut out toxic outside things, nor do they have a support system for things like that. If you have the means to go and speak to somebody that isn't just a dummy with a microphone, do it,
Yeah.
because sometimes that's what it takes.
Yeah.
People have had, results may vary, but um, 9 times out of 10, I don't feel like it can hurt. And
Yeah.
it's just, I think the reason that this dialogue is so important is I think the worst thing that you can do when you're struggling, especially with a sense of isolation, is try to deal with it yourself. Because
Right.
that's one thing that I realized is I got myself into the position that I was in by trying to do it all my own.
Right.
Like I wasn't leaning on the people I should have been leaning on. I wasn't asking for advice when I needed it. I was just, I in the Marine Corps, I had been taught, and I was driven to be a productive member of a team by being a productive and like I was my goal was to be a good member of our team and of the organization by being a proficient and well-rounded individual.
Yeah.
But you don't really ask for help as much, especially with stuff like mental health and stuff like that. You just kind of deal with it. But
Yeah.
I took that from the Marine Corps and I was like, well, I'm gonna be a good friend to you, and I'm gonna be a good boyfriend, son, family member, coworker, whatever, by being a well functioning, uh, productive, educated individual, and I have to get there by myself. Like I have to get myself there.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people need to, myself included, I'm still working on it all the time, um, need to be comfortable becoming. It's okay to not be one.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel like you're less than a whole. This is gonna. I'm trying to put this in a way that's like not making somebody feel less, but it's
Yeah.
okay to acknowledge the fact that you can't get there by yourself. And I
Right.
think that's
That's how it would.
important.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
And for me, like I said, I think um, that has to be the first step to get you out of where you're at.
yeah,
Um, you can't. Um, it's not selfish to have those thoughts, but it is prideful to want to do it on your.
yeah,
Because you know because like what we were saying, you're not thinking rationally enough um to see how much of an impact you have on your on the people in your life. And it's just there are so many. There are communities.
yeah,
There are people that um, it doesn't matter if you don't know them from Adam, but they care enough about you. Um, you know, I there's people on a Facebook page that I'm a part of, Mendleton, who like if they're going through a rough time, it's like you know a deployment of people that
yeah,
are like reaching out, like doing whatever they can, like doing like real life open source intelligence on these people to try to get in contact with somebody close to them so they can talk.
yeah,
Like, um, and most of these people don't know you, like, but it doesn't matter because even if they don't know you, like you know, nobody's worth nothing,
yeah,
and there's nobody on earth who you know who doesn't make the world better by their presence. Um, even if you feel pretty, even if you feel like you're you know the sun doesn't shine brighter with you night.
yeah. Agreed. And it's
And
hard to
that's
see that when you're in that space, and that's why you need when you can't feel that, that's why you need other people to
to
tell you that.
show you. Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree completely. But
Yep.
you are doing better now.
Yeah, I'm doing better. now. Talking to a community. I have communities that I'm part of. Um, I stay grateful and stay blessed for the people that I'm closest to. You know, I, you know, my baby, my, Grace and my pets or whatever, they're awesome. Nothing holds a candle to me who, um, if there's one person that, I can honestly say has single-handedly saved my life, it would be me.
Yeah.
And that's not just me saying it because I,
Because you know she's gonna watch.
yeah, but you know, there's nobody on earth that holds a candle to my wife. Um, and like I said, communities that I'm going to shout out at the end of the show. Um,
Well, yeah, we're coming up on
we're
3
here.
hours now, so
Yeah. Well,
let's. So yeah, get what communities are you thinking?
so there's a community called VetSec. I'll give you the links and everything.
Yeah,
Uh,
drop them in the Discord.
so VetSec is it's a Slack channel, mostly, but it's about um, veterans and who, man, words are hard. It's about veterans who want to get into the cybersecurity space,
Okay.
which isn't easy. And there's a lot of different people uh, in there from a lot of different backgrounds. Let me, man, I've locked down everything. You can edit this out.
It's all good, dude.
Yeah, because I just want to give you the right link. Da, 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 da. Because VetSec has an offshoot called Mental Health Hackers.
Nice.
It's not. Um, Boom. So VetSec's website is sec.com.
Okay.
And then so they have an offshoot that they help out with. They have a lot of slapping uh, officers and stuff with mental health hackers, which that's mentalhealthhackers.com.
.org.
Yeah, and then um, I'm not much, but uh, I like I want people to reach out to me, so you can do that. Uh, LinkedIn. Best way to find me on LinkedIn is to go to aka.ms/cam. That redirects to my LinkedIn. I check that most often. I'm not really on Facebook except to get into which I'm pretty good at.
Except
Really
to
good at
get
shaking
into what?
political arguments.
Yeah, you do start shit on
Really,
Facebook all the time.
yeah, I'm really good at shaking. Really, it's it really is a hobby to really get people's jimmies rustled.
Hell yeah. That's
But
actually
if you,
a really, really quick aside. That's actually why Cameron and I became friends because when we were at ITX, I don't even know if we had gone yet, but when we were at I think it was at ITX, but I just kept finding myself like, we're standing around shooting the shit or something, and I would just hear this like quiet, unassuming voice just drop the most lethal comedy bombs, like these just savage fucking one-liners from like right. I'm like, who is this man? Like, and so Cam loves just being a savage and getting onto people. But yeah, if you want to get at him I'll post his links in the YouTube description and in the social media for this episode. And then also, I've got the Discord channel or the Discord server up and running for the podcast, so I will put that in the YouTube description and the social media as well. And Cameron, we've been playing video games over Discord together for forever, so he's obviously going to be active in that if once we get people. So if you need to reach out to him, his name will either be his name, Cameron Barts, or some offshoot of King of Shade, which has been his online persona ever since I discovered
that actually came from Scott.
Yeah.
He said that offhand on ship, and that was like, well, that's my new call sign. So now it's either King of Shade or like you said, some offshoot.
Yeah.
You can find me pretty much everywhere.
All right, perfect.
Not on Twitter anymore.
Yeah, I bummed out. I made a new Twitter for the podcast, and why'd you leave Twitter?
I'm too much to follow.
Oh.
I like I said, I have other. I lurk on VetSec a lot, but you can pretty much hit me up on there. But
all right, perfect.
that LinkedIn link is good. Hit me up there.
All right,
I check it.
Sounds good. Well, I appreciate it, buddy. Thank you so much for talking to me. And
thanks for having this show.
Absolutely, dude. And let's fucking play some games soon, right?
Yeah, dude, definitely.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening. I really hope that Cam's story brought something to the table that you guys could take away from. He was apprehensive about doing the show at first, but then after listening to a couple episodes, thought that his story could be useful to some people. So I really hope that there was something in there for everybody. I'm going to go ahead and put the resources that he talked about in the descriptions on the social media and stuff, so check that out if you haven't already. But I appreciate you all very much, and see you next time.
You know you're one thing back.